today we take a big leap forward in the book. We're going to jump all the way to section 15.1. We jump at this point all the way to section 15.1 to study absolute value equations and inequalities because they kind of go pretty well together with polynomial equations and polynomial inequalities, which are things we just did. So what's an absolute value equation going to look like? Well, what's absolute value? It tells you the distance from 0. Okay, so we might have something like solve absolute value of, I'll make one up here, 2x minus 3 equals 5. I'm going to start by solving this one on my calculator. And then we'll talk about how you solve these by hand. First off, does anybody know where the absolute value button is on your calculator? I hit the math button. Math is over here. Go over the next one. And it's right there, number 1. Okay. The other way to get to it, and this is the way I usually do it, notice on the 0 button down here, up above the 0 button, there's something called catalog. I like to go the blue second button and then hit 0. And catalog gives an alphabetical list of everything the calculator can do. And it just happens to turn out that absolute value is the first thing that comes up alphabetically. So either way to get to it is fine. All right, so we're going to go back to y equals. I need absolute value. Again, if you have a newer calculator like mine, it actually prints the absolute value symbols. If you have an older calculator, what did it do? It actually writes the letters ABS and then puts a parenthesis. So it depends on your calculator. We had 2x minus 3. Oops. 2x minus 3. And then for y2, I type in 5. I'm going to graph by hitting zoom number 6 so that I go back to my standard window. And I get this picture. Now, this is the reason why these equations kind of go along with polynomial equations. What you should notice is that absolute value is a big V. It's not a line. It's a non-linear function. How many answers are there? 2. How do you know there are 2 answers? There are 2 intersects. That's correct. So there's another thing that quite often happens when you have nonlinear equations. When you have nonlinear equations, you usually get more than one answer. And here's a good example. We get 2 answers. How do I find my 2 answers? Second, calc. Go down to number 5, which is intersect. Hit enter. It asks me, is that the first equation? Sure. Is that the second one? Yeah, I only typed in 2. A guess? It gives me one answer. It's x equals negative 1. It also tells me y equals 5, but I don't write down the y number on my answer. Why not? My equation only has x's in it. There's no y's in my equation. I don't really care what the y number is. All right, then I got to do that again. So I go second, calculate, intersect. Is that the first equation? Yes. Is that the first equation? Yes. Make a guess. This time I got to move over to the right, so it'll find that one. I hit enter. It tells me x is 4. So we ended up with 2 answers. Questions on that? Yes? Your V doesn't look the same as mine. If your V doesn't look the same as mine, there are 2 possibilities. 1, you type something in wrong, and 2, you have a different window. So it looks like yours is the same. You have the older type calculator. Oh, no, I see your mistake. Anybody see his mistake? You've got the wrong minus sign. Very simple, subtle mistake to make. Hard to see. You've got the wrong minus sign right there. And now yours looks like mine again. Okay? Okay, so now how do we solve these by hand? Well, to solve by hand, I'm going to start with an easier example. What if I just asked you to solve absolute value of x equals 3? X could certainly be the number 3. That's one answer.
And it's -3.
Or x could be the number -3. Why could x be 3 or x could be -3?
Because it's only it's 3 places away from 0. It could be positive or negative.
Two ways to answer it. Answer number one is, I'm looking for all the numbers that are 3 steps away from 0. That's what this says. There are two numbers that are 3 steps away from 0. One is 3, one is -3. The other way to answer it is, if I plug in 3, what's the absolute value of 3? 3. Absolute value doesn't do anything to positive numbers. If I plug in -3, what does absolute value do to negative numbers? Makes them positive. Okay. What if I gave you the absolute value of x minus 1 equals 3? How does it change it when I put an x minus 1 inside the parentheses there? I'm going to add 1. Subtract 1.
Don't you change it to x, like change all of them to positive x plus 1, and then when you take x above away, you subtract the plus 1?
No, unfortunately, absolute value doesn't play nice when you have minus signs and plus signs. The absolute value of x minus 1 is not the same as x plus 1, unfortunately. What if I had put this instead? What if I didn't put x minus 1? What if I'd used the letter y? What would you tell me? Y could be the number 3, or y could be the number -3. So what numbers could x minus 1 be? X minus 1 could be the number, not positive 1, but rather positive 3. Because if I have a 3 in there, the absolute value of 3 is going to give me 3. Or x minus 1 could be what other number? What other number would I plug in there to get 3 for an answer? -3. So, if I have a 3 out here, all I have to do is whatever's in the brackets could be the number 3. Or whatever's in the brackets could be the number -3. Let's check and see if it works. This one gives me x equals 4. And this one gives me x equals -2. So let's see what happens. Plug in 4. What's 4 minus 1? 3. And then the absolute value of 3 is 3. Plug in -2. -2 minus 1? -3. Absolute value of -3 is 3. Okay, so that's how these work. Let's try this one. We already know the answer for this one. Absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals 5. Well, what has to happen is, whatever's inside the brackets, the 2x minus 3, could be exactly the number 5. Because when I take the absolute value of 5, I will get 5. What's the other possibility? Whatever's inside the brackets could be -5. Notice I don't change what's inside the brackets at all. All you do is you change the sign of the number. It's either 5 or it's -5. You don't change what's inside the brackets at all. It stays as 2x minus 3 both times. We solve each equation. Here we add 3, so 2x is 8, and we divide, x is 4. And that's the same answer we got up there. That's good. Over here we add 3, 2x is -2. So x is -1. Get the exact same answer I got before. Questions on that one? All right, let's try one more of those. How about absolute value of? Give me some numbers. Anybody got some numbers they like? 4 and 6. Okay, so 1/4 x plus 1/6. That was mean, wasn't it? You can tell two numbers, I turn them into fractions. Equals 12. 112 or 112? 112, all right. As long as we're going with fractions, we'll take it all the way. Again, don't let the fractions ruin your fun. They shouldn't be that bad. What do? Well, we take whatever's inside the brackets. We take the 1/4 x plus 1/6, and we set it equal to 112. And then we write it again. We take the 1/4 x plus 1/6, and we set it equal to negative 112. We change the sign of the number. We don't change anything about the parentheses. All right. Now what? Find the common denominator. Okay, what's the common denominator? 12. And what are you going to do with that common denominator? Multiply to everything, and that'll make the fractions go away. So again, the fractions really shouldn't be that big a deal. I'm going to multiply everything by 12. What's 12 divided by 4? 3, so that one becomes 3x. Plus, what's 12 divided by 6? 2. Equals, what's 12 divided by 12? 1. And now suddenly it looks very simple, doesn't it? All right, again, don't let fractions scare you. Multiply by the common denominator, make them go away. We subtract 2, we get 3x equals negative 1. So x is negative 1/3. And over here, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to multiply everything by 12 to get rid of my denominators, and I'm going to end up with 3x plus 2 equals negative 1. The left-hand side is exactly the same. The only thing different on the right is the minus sign. Subtract the 2, 3x is negative 3, x is negative 1. Questions on that one? All right, one more equation, and then we'll go to some inequalities. How about absolute value of 4x minus 1 equals negative 6? What would you do? And? All right, so that's what we've been doing all along, isn't it? We leave the things alone, we set them equal to, and then we change the signs. I forgot to tell you, this is a trick question. You can't do it when it's negative. Why not? Well, what can you tell me about the left-hand side? What happens when you take the absolute value of anything? It's a positive, or at worst, 0. So the left-hand side is 0 or a positive number. Can 0 or a positive number ever equal a negative number? No. All right, so you do need to be careful. Every now and then we throw in trick questions here. What's the answer? No solution. And if we look at a graph, y equals the absolute value of 4x minus 1 and negative 6. You'll see the 4x minus 1, that's always positive or 0, and the negative 6, of course, is negative. Where do those cross? Nowhere. All right, so watch out for that. When you're dealing with absolute values, watch out for negative numbers over here. Those are always the trick questions. The answer is simply no solution. All right, now, once you understand equations, inequalities aren't too bad. Let's say I had absolute value of 4x minus 1, we'll stick with that, less than 7. What you're going to do is, for just a minute, you're going to forget about that less than symbol, and you're going to pretend it's an equal. So you're going to come off to the side, and you're going to solve 4x minus 1 equals 7. 4x minus 1 equals negative 7. It's very much like what we did with polynomial inequalities. We first solve pretending we have an equal to there. Well, we solve both of these. We get 4x equals 8. X is 2. And then we come back over here. We have 4x is negative 6. We divide by 4. X is negative 6 over 4, which reduces to be negative 3/2. So you start by solving the equation. But now we've got to figure out what to do with the less than symbol. Any ideas on what to do?
You plug the root back in the equation.
Close. We draw a number line, just like we did when we had polynomial inequalities. We mark our 2 points on the number line, minus 3/2 and 2. Minus 3/2 and 2. Should I put circles or dots?
Circle.
Circles. Why circles?
It's not equal to.
It's less than. There's no equal to there. And then I pick my favorite numbers. What's my favorite number in the whole wide world bigger than 2? 4. Okay, I put 4 in. What's 4 times 1? 16. 16 minus 1. 15. Take the absolute value of 15. 15. Is 15 less than 7? No. 4 didn't work, so nothing up there is going to work. We cross it off. Favorite number in the whole wide world between negative 3/2 and 2? 0. Plug 0 in. 4 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 1 is minus 1. Absolute value of minus 1? 1. Is 1 less than 7? Yes. 0 worked, so everything in between will work. And finally, I pick my favorite number smaller than minus 3/2. What's your favorite number smaller than minus 3/2? Negative 2, because minus 3/2 is negative 1.5. So negative 2 would definitely be further left. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 minus 1 is negative 9. But then I do absolute values, that gives me 9. Is 9 less than 7? No, so I cross it off. How would you rate that answer? Less than 2. Yep. X is in the middle. X is in the middle between negative 3/2 and 2, so we would write it that way. Negative 3/2 less than x less than 2. If you were asked to write it in interval notation, you would have round parentheses on both of them because there's no equal to. All right, how about if I switch it to a greater than? How about, oh, I don't know, somebody give me some numbers again. I promise I won't make fractions this time. Need a good number. 6x. Minus 3. Greater than or equal to 24. All right, going with a big number. Make it interesting. Okay, again, what I do is I first go off to the side. I pretend like I don't have the greater than symbol. I pretend like I just have equal to. So I'm going to take 6x minus 3 equals 24. And 6x minus 3 equals negative 24. And I solve both of those. Add 3. 6x equals 27. So x is 27 over 6. That can reduce by 3 to be 9/2. And then this one, 6x equals, when I add 3, I get negative 21. So x is negative 21 over 6, which again reduces by 3 to be negative 7/2. All right, so we ended up with fractions. Happens. Not really a problem. You draw your number line. Here's 9/2. Here's negative 7/2. Circles or dots? Dots, because it is equal to in the original problem. We do have that equal to. What's your favorite number in the whole wide world bigger than 9 halves? 6, because 9 halves is, you think of it as a decimal, it's 4.5. So 6 is definitely bigger. 6 times 6. 36 minus 3 is 33. When I do absolute value, I still get 33. Is 33 bigger than 24? Yes. 6 worked. Every number is going to work up there. Favorite number in the whole wide world between negative 7 halves and positive 9 halves? 0. So do you see that it's really not a problem that we had fractions here? We don't ever have to use the fractions, do we? We pick our favorite numbers. I pick 0. When I plug 0 in, I get absolute value of negative 3, which is 3. Is 3 bigger than 24? No. Cross it off. Favorite number in the whole wide world down here smaller than negative 7 halves? Negative 8, because negative 7 halves is negative 3.5. Negative 8's much down further. 6 times negative 8. Negative 48 minus 3. Actually, negative 51. But either way, when you take the absolute value, you're still going to get something bigger than 24, aren't you? So you make an arithmetic mistake there. It doesn't hurt you. Not a big deal. Looks like that. How are you going to write that as an inequality answer? What do you have to do when you have two pieces shaded that aren't connected? You got to write two different answers. So we have to write the first one on the left as x is less than or equal to negative 7 halves. And the one on the right is x is bigger than or equal to 9 halves. And if I was asked to write this in interval notation, it would be, going all the way to the left would be negative infinity, comma, negative 7 halves. Negative infinity and positive infinity always get a round bracket, but the negative 7 halves gets a square bracket. Why does a negative 7 halves get a square bracket? Because it's got the equal to. And then we would have the 9 halves, again with a square bracket because it had the equal to. Infinity. Infinity always gets a round one. Questions on that? All right, last two questions, two trick questions. I'm warning you this time. Trick questions. Absolute value of 2x minus 1 greater than negative 5. So there's the first trick question. And the second trick question is absolute value of 2x minus 1 less than negative 5. Again, be very, very leery of negative numbers over here when you have absolute value. What's the answer to the first one? No solution? That's the answer to the second one. The first one, what's going to happen when you take absolute value on the left-hand side? What kind of number are you going to get? When is a positive number going to be bigger than negative 5? Always. So what's the answer to the first one? All real numbers. I can plug in any number I want for x. No matter what number I plug in for x, I'm going to get 0 or a positive number. 0 or a positive number is always going to be bigger than negative 5. So this one's all real numbers. The second one, I think I gave it away. I said I think the answer for the second one is no solution, because on the left-hand side we're going to get a positive number. When is a positive thing going to be less than negative 5? Never. Okay, so you got to be a little bit more careful there. When you have absolute values, it depends on which way the sign goes. Sometimes you get no solution. Sometimes you get all the solutions. Questions on that? Now, I will warn you, if you read the book, or if you click on the show me, or if you click on the watch a video on the homework, the book teaches you to solve inequalities in a different way that I did. And their way is fine, but I think their way is confusing, because their way is, they say, if you have a less than symbol, you do one thing. If you have a greater than symbol, you do something else. And I think that can get very confusing. I think it's easier to say, always treat it like an equation, and then draw your number line. And it will always give you the right answer. If you want to read the book, or if you want to watch those videos on how they do it online, and you want to do it that way, or if you've learned a different way to do these in the past, and you like doing it that way, perfectly fine with me. But I just want you to know the book does do it in a different way. Equations, they do the same way. It's the inequalities they do different.